The coastal town of Willow Bay was a sleepy enclave, its cobbled streets lined with weathered clapboard houses and dotted with family-owned shops that had stood for generations. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, but secrets could still linger in the morning fog that rolled in from the Pacific. For Elias Harper, Willow Bay was home, a place where he'd built a quiet life as a carpenter, his hands perpetually dusted with sawdust, his days filled with the rhythm of hammer and chisel. But Willow Bay was also where his past lay buried, a past that was about to resurface in the most unexpected way. Elias had grown up in Willow Bay, the only son of a high school librarian and a retired marine biologist. He was a reserved teenager in the early 2000s, more comfortable sketching driftwood designs in his notebook than chasing popularity at bonfires on Willow Beach. It was during his sophomore year that he met Clara Beaumont. Not the Clara Beaumont the world would later know, but a shy, freckled girl with a contagious laugh and a passion for theater. They'd been paired for a biology project, dissecting starfish under the flickering fluorescent lights of Mr. Callahan's classroom. Clara's enthusiasm for the smallest details, the way the starfish's tube feet moved, the texture of its spiny skin, had drawn Elias in. By the end of the semester, they were inseparable. Their romance blossomed in the quiet corners of Willow Bay, stolen kisses behind the old lighthouse, late-night talks on the pier, and shared milkshakes at Rosie's Diner. Clara dreamed of acting, her eyes lighting up when she spoke of Broadway or Hollywood. Elias, ever practical, planned to take over his uncle's carpentry business. They were young, in love, and convinced their differences would only make them stronger. For 3 years, they were the golden couple of Willow Bay High, their names whispered with a mix of admiration and envy. But dreams have a way of pulling people apart. When Clara was accepted to a prestigious acting school in New York, the distance seemed surmountable at first. They promised to make it work. Letters, phone calls, visits when they could afford them. Yet the strain grew with each passing month. Clara's world expanded with auditions and rehearsals, while Elias remained anchored in Willow Bay, sanding cedar planks and dreaming of her. By their second year apart, the calls became shorter, the letters fewer. The breakup, when it came, was gentle. No shouting, no accusations, just two people acknowledging that their paths had diverged. Clara hugged him one last time during a Christmas visit home, her eyes misty but resolute. "You'll always be my first love, Elias," she said. And then she was gone. Elias moved on, or so he thought. He built a life in Willow Bay, taking over his uncle's workshop and earning a reputation for crafting furniture that seemed to carry the soul of the ocean. He dated sporadically, but nothing stuck until he met Annabelle Larson. Annabelle was a graphic designer who'd moved to Willow Bay from Seattle, seeking a quieter life after a burnout-inducing job at a tech startup. With her quick wit and love for hiking, she brought a spark to Elias's steady routine. They met at a local art fair where Annabelle admired one of his hand-carved tables. A coffee date turned into weekly hikes, then dinners at her cozy apartment overlooking the bay. By their one-year anniversary, Elias was beginning to wonder if Annabelle might be the one to build a future with. Clara, meanwhile, had become a household name. Her breakout role in a coming-of-age film had catapulted her to stardom, followed by an Oscar-nominated performance in a historical drama. Her face graced magazine covers, her name trended on social media, and her red carpet appearances were dissected by tabloids. Elias followed her success from afar, a quiet pride mingling with nostalgia. He never spoke of her, not out of secrecy, but because she felt like a chapter from another life. To him, Clara was the girl who'd once tripped over a stage prop during a school play, not the untouchable celebrity the world adored. On the evening of their anniversary, Elias took Annabelle to the Salty Anchor, Willow Bay's finest restaurant, known for its candlelit tables and panoramic views of the harbor. Annabelle wore a sapphire dress that matched her eyes, and Elias felt a warmth in his chest as they clinked glasses of wine. The night was perfect, until Annabelle's gaze darted to the entrance, her face lighting up with excitement. "Elias, look! It's Clara Beaumont," she whispered, her voice trembling with awe. Elias turned, his heart giving a strange lurch. There she was, Clara, her auburn hair swept into a loose bun, her presence commanding the room despite her casual sweater and jeans. Beside her was her mother, Mrs. Beaumont, whose warm smile hadn't changed in a decade. Elias wasn't entirely surprised. The Beaumonts still lived in Willow Bay, logically, and Clara was known to visit quietly when her schedule allowed. Before he could process the moment, Annabelle was fumbling with her purse, muttering about needing an autograph. But Clara's eyes found Elias first. Her face broke into a radiant smile, and she crossed the restaurant with her mother in tow. "Elias Harper!" she exclaimed, pulling him into a hug that smelled faintly of lavender. "It's been forever!" Annabelle froze, her mouth slightly agape as Clara greeted Elias like an old friend. Mrs. Beaumont chimed in, asking about his carpentry business and reminiscing about the time Elias had built a bookshelf for their living room. The conversation flowed easily, a mix of nostalgia and catching up. Clara asked about Elias's life with genuine interest, and he answered modestly, deflecting attention from himself. Annabelle, still starstruck, managed to ask for an autograph, which Clara provided with a gracious laugh. After a few minutes, Clara and her mother excused themselves to their table, leaving Elias and Annabelle to resume their dinner. To Elias, the encounter was a pleasant surprise, a brief bridge to a past he'd long since made peace with. But as they drove home, Annabelle's silence grew heavy. When they reached her apartment, she turned to him, her eyes blazing. "Why didn't you tell me you knew Clara Beaumont?" she demanded. "Not just knew her? Dated her? That's a huge deal, Elias." Elias blinked, caught off guard. "It never came up," he said. "It was years ago, before she was famous. I didn't think it mattered." "Didn't think it mattered?" Annabelle's voice rose. "You were high school sweethearts with one of the biggest actresses in the world, and you kept it a secret. That's not just omitting a detail, that's lying." Elias tried to explain. He told her about his relationship with Clara, the breakup, and his reluctance to share a story that felt private, especially given Clara's fame. "If I went around telling people, it'd feel like I was using her name for clout," he said. "Or worse, betraying her trust. Willow Bay's her safe place. She doesn't need her past splashed around." Annabelle wasn't convinced. "A lie of omission is still a lie," she said, her voice trembling with hurt. "I thought we were open with each other. How am I supposed to trust you now?" The argument stretched into the night, leaving Elias sleepless and Annabelle tearful. By morning, they'd agreed to take a few days apart to cool off. Elias returned to his workshop, the rhythmic scrape of his plane against wood doing little to quiet his thoughts. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been blindsided, not by Clara's appearance, but by Annabelle's reaction. To him, his past with Clara was a closed book, irrelevant to the life he was building with Annabelle. But Annabelle saw it as a betrayal, a hidden chapter that called their trust into question. As the days passed, Willow Bay's gossip mill began to churn. Word of Clara's visit and her warm reunion with Elias spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered at the grocery store, and a local blog even posted a blurry photo of the encounter captioned "Hollywood star reconnects with hometown flame." Elias ignored it, but he knew Annabelle wouldn't. The rift between them deepened, and Elias began to wonder if his past would cost him his future. A week after the anniversary dinner, Elias sat in his workshop, staring at a half-finished cedar chest. The grain of the wood seemed to mock him, its knots and whirls a reminder of the tangled mess his life had become. Annabelle hadn't called, and her texts were curt, limited to logistics about returning a sweater he'd left at her place. The silence was louder than their argument had been. Willow Bay, meanwhile, buzzed with speculation. The local blog's post had gone viral within the town's small online community, spawning threads on social media about Elias and Clara's reunion. Some reminisced about their high school romance, while others speculated about a rekindled spark. Elias avoided Rosie's diner and the hardware store, unwilling to face the knowing glances of neighbors. He focused on his work, but even that felt hollow. The chest he was building was meant for Annabelle, a surprise for her birthday next month. Now, he wasn't sure she'd ever see it. Clara, unaware of the storm she'd inadvertently stirred, had left Willow Bay the day after the restaurant encounter. Her visit had been brief, a chance to celebrate her mother's birthday away from the paparazzi's glare. But her presence lingered, not just in the gossip, but in Elias's mind. He didn't miss Clara, not in the way the town seemed to think. Their love had been real but fleeting, a product of youth and circumstance. Yet her reappearance had forced him to confront questions he'd buried. Had he truly moved on? And why had he never told Annabelle about her? The answer, he realized, was rooted in loyalty, not to Annabelle, but to Clara. Even after all these years, he felt protective of her privacy. Willow Bay was her refuge, the one place where she could be Clara Beaumont, not the celebrity. Telling Annabelle, or anyone, risked turning that refuge into another stage. But Annabelle saw his silence as a betrayal, and Elias couldn't entirely blame her. Trust, he was learning, was as fragile as the veneer he applied to his furniture. Determined to make things right, Elias drove to Annabelle's apartment on a foggy Saturday morning. She answered the door in sweatpants, her hair in a messy bun, her expression guarded. "What do you want, Elias?" she asked. "To talk," he said. "Really talk?" She hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. The apartment smelled of coffee and lavender candles, a familiar comfort that made his chest ache. They sat at her kitchen table, the harbor visible through the window, its waters gray and restless. Elias started from the beginning. His high school years with Clara, their dreams, their breakup, and the years of silence that followed. He explained why he'd kept it private, not out of deceit, but out of respect for a past that wasn't his to exploit. Annabelle listened, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. When he finished, she sighed. "I get why you didn't tell people," she said. "But I'm not people, Elias. I'm your girlfriend. Or at least I thought I was." "You are," he said, his voice earnest. "I didn't think it would hurt you because it's so far in the past. Claire's not part of my life anymore. You are." "Then why does it feel like you're hiding something?" she asked. "It's not just Clara. It's the fact that you decided what I should know about you. What else haven't you told me?" The question hung between them, heavy and unanswerable. Elias wanted to say there was nothing else, but he realized Annabelle's trust had been shaken, not just by Clara, but by the realization that Elias could compartmentalize his life so neatly. They talked for hours, peeling back layers of hurt and misunderstanding. Annabelle admitted her own insecurities, how Clara's glamour and fame had made her feel small, how the town's gossip had amplified her doubts. Elias confessed his fear of losing her and his struggle to reconcile his private nature with her need for openness. By evening, they'd reached a tentative truce. Annabelle agreed to give their relationship another chance, but she needed time to rebuild trust. Elias promised to be more open, even about the parts of his past he'd long since locked away. They parted with a hug, not the passionate embrace of their early days, but a quiet acknowledgement of their shared fragility. In the weeks that followed, Elias and Annabelle worked to mend their bond. They went on hikes, cooked dinners together, and really talked, about their fears and hopes. The town's gossip eventually faded, replaced by newer scandals. Clara, blissfully unaware of the drama, sent Elias a brief email, thanking him for the warm encounter and wishing him well. He showed it to Annabelle, a small gesture of transparency that earned him a smile. The cedar chest remained in Elias's workshop, unfinished but not abandoned. He worked on it in stolen moments, carving intricate waves into its lid, each stroke a promise to build something lasting, not just with wood, but with Annabelle. The past, he realized, could never be erased, but it didn't have to define the future. In Willow Bay, where the fog always lifted to reveal the sea, Elias and Annabelle were learning to navigate their own uncertainties, one honest step at a time. The autumn winds swept through Willow Bay, carrying the scent of salt and pine as the town settled into its quieter months. Elias Harper's workshop became his sanctuary, the hum of his tools a steady counterpoint to the uncertainty still lingering between him and Annabelle Larson. The cedar chest, now nearly complete, stood as a testament to his hope, a tangible commitment to repairing what had been strained. Its surface gleamed with a deep oceanic sheen, the carved waves on its lid catching the light like ripples on the bay. But as Elias sanded its edges, his thoughts churned with questions about trust, love, and the weight of unspoken truths. Annabelle, meanwhile, was grappling with her own turmoil. Their talks had softened the edges of her hurt, but doubts still flickered like shadows at dusk. She'd always prided herself on her independence, her ability to read people through their designs and decisions. Yet Elias's omission about Clara Beaumont had blindsided her, revealing a blind spot in their relationship. Was it her fault for not asking more about his past? Or was it his for assuming it didn't matter? She spent her days sketching logos for a new client, her pencil strokes sharp and deliberate, as if she could draw clarity from the chaos. The turning point came unexpectedly on a crisp October evening. Elias had invited Annabelle to a bonfire at Willow Beach, a tradition among locals to mark the end of tourist season. The beach was alive with laughter, the crackle of driftwood fires mingling with the crash of waves. Annabelle arrived late, her scarf fluttering in the breeze, and found Elias tending a small fire pit away from the crowd. He'd set up 2 chairs and a thermos of hot cider, a quiet gesture that felt like an apology and an invitation. They sat in companionable silence at first, watching the flames dance. Then Annabelle spoke, her voice low but steady. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she said. "About why I got so upset. It wasn't just Clara. It was the idea that you could keep something so big from me. It made me wonder what else I don't know." Elias nodded, his gaze fixed on the fire. "I've been thinking about that too," he said. "I thought I was protecting Clara's privacy, but maybe I was also protecting myself. It's easier to keep the past locked away than to explain it, but I don't want to do that with you anymore." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook, his old sketchbook from high school. Its pages were yellowed, filled with drawings of driftwood sculptures, lighthouses, and, in the margins, doodles of a girl with freckles and a bright smile. "This was me back then," he said, handing it to Annabelle. "Clara's in there, but so is everything else I was. I want you to know all of it." Annabelle flipped through the pages, her fingers tracing the faded ink. The sketches were raw, unguarded, a window into a younger Elias, dreamy, uncertain, and deeply in love with the world around him. She paused at a drawing of two hands clasped, one labeled C and the other E. It was intimate but not threatening. It was history, not competition. "You were such a romantic," she said, a small smile breaking through. "I still am," Elias replied, meeting her eyes. "But I'm trying to be better at showing it. I don't want secrets between us, Annabelle, not anymore." The bonfire marked a shift. Annabelle began to share more of her own past, her struggles with anxiety in Seattle, her fear of being overshadowed by others' success. Elias listened, asking questions, letting her words fill the spaces he'd once kept closed. They started small traditions: Sunday walks along the pier, late-night talks over tea, each moment a brick in the foundation they were rebuilding. The cedar chest was finished by November, just in time for Annabelle's birthday. Elias delivered it to her apartment, his hands nervous as she ran her fingers over the carved waves. Inside, he'd tucked a letter, not a grand declaration, but a quiet promise to keep her in the center of his story, past and present. Annabelle's eyes shimmered as she read it, and for the first time in weeks, she kissed him with the warmth of their early days. Willow Bay's gossip had long since moved on, the whispers about Clara replaced by tales of a local fisherman's record-breaking catch. But the town's rhythm, its tides, its seasons, reminded Elias and Annabelle that healing, like the sea, moved in cycles. There were still moments of doubt, late-night conversations that circled back to trust. But they faced them together, learning to navigate the ebb and flow of love in a town where the past was never far from the surface. As winter approached, Elias and Annabelle stood on the pier one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was sharp with cold, but their hands were warm, entwined. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" Annabelle asked, her voice soft against the wind. Elias squeezed her hand. "Yeah," he said. "We're going to be more than okay." The waves rolled in, steady and unending, carrying away the last echoes of doubt. In Willow Bay, where every story was shaped by the sea, Elias and Annabelle were writing a new chapter, one built on truth, trust, and the courage to face whatever tides came next.